Hey guys, in today's video, I bring you an impressive story full of revelations. Let's meet Cassidy Everhart, a surgeon who faced death during a routine procedure and was taken to a place between worlds. There, she revisited her life, found her deceased mother, and received an urgent message about the fate of humanity. What she saw on the other side is chilling and brings a powerful warning. January 16th will be decisive for all of us. Before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any content like this. Now get ready for this intense and transformative journey. It was a cloudy Tuesday in Seattle, and the movement at the hospital was, callous for a change, frantic. As a surgeon, I have always enjoyed the controlled chaos of the operating room. Each procedure was like solving a puzzle, and I was good at it. That afternoon, I was about to perform a routine appendectomy on a 17-year-old girl named Emily. She seemed nervous, so before I put her under anesthesia, I held her hand and said, "You'll snap out of this in no time, Emily. Trust me." She smiled weakly, and within minutes she was unconscious. The procedure began without incident, and everything seemed to be going as planned. While removing the inflamed appendix, I felt a strange tingling in my left arm. It must be tiredness, I thought. I ignored it and continued, but the tingling turned into a twinge, and the twinge quickly evolved into a pain that took my breath away. I released the scalpel, and it fell onto the tray with a sharp metallic sound. "Dr. Callahan, take over," I managed to mutter, before grabbing the table to keep from falling. "Is everything okay, Cassidy?" asked Liam Callahan, my colleague and friend. His voice sounded distant, as if he were on the other side of a tunnel. I shook my head, but the dizziness increased. Everything started to go dark around me, and the last thing I heard before I lost consciousness was Liam's voice, now full of panic. "Call help. She's falling." When I opened my eyes, I noticed something strange. I was no longer in my body. I floated above the operating room, watching Liam and the others frantically running around me. My body was stretched out on the table, inert, while they performed resuscitation maneuvers. Liam barked orders, and the machines beeped in protest. Interestingly, I didn't feel afraid. There was a disconcerting peace, as if he was exactly where he was supposed to be. My vision expanded, and suddenly I could see not only the operating room, but also other parts of the hospital. I could hear fragments of conversations, patients crying, laughter on another floor. Everything felt connected, and I was part of it. When I looked back at my body, I felt a slight pull away from the scene. A warm darkness enveloped me, and I was sucked into a space where time and space had no meaning. I floated through the darkness, but it wasn't the kind of darkness that brought fear or loneliness. It was welcoming, as if I were being wrapped in an invisible blanket. Everything around me seemed to pulse gently, like a heart beating in harmony with something much larger. There was no gravity, time, or space. It was as if all my worries had been ripped away from me. The physical pain and emotional tension I carried completely disappeared. For the first time in years, perhaps for the first time in my life, I felt completely free. As I indulged in this feeling, I noticed a faint light in the distance. It was small but bright, like a star in the night sky. I was drawn to her in a way I couldn't control, like a magnet. As I got closer, the light grew, getting brighter and warmer, but without being blinding or uncomfortable. It was like being enveloped in a hug of pure light. A presence began to form in the center of the light. It wasn't a face I recognized immediately, but its energy was familiar, feminine, comforting, and infinitely loving. When she finally spoke, her voice seemed to not only fill my ears, but my entire being. "Cassidy," she said, my name echoing in the expanse. "You're safe here. Don't be afraid." Somehow I knew I could trust her. "Where am I?" I asked, my voice sounding strangely distant, as if it were coming from someone else. "You are between worlds," she replied, her voice as soft as a summer breeze. "A place to find clarity and understand what really matters." She came closer, and her form became clearer. She was a figure of light, but there was something about her that reminded me of my mother. My heart seemed to tighten and expand at the same time. "Evelyn?" I whispered, using my late mother's name. "Yes, Cassidy," she said, smiling with a tenderness that made me want to cry. "I came to guide you, but there is much more you need to see." Suddenly, the space around us began to transform. It was as if the fabric of the universe was shaping itself to create something I couldn't yet understand. The light around me seemed to pulse as the environment changed. Suddenly, a huge screen of light appeared before me. It was no ordinary projection. It was alive, as if each image was a throbbing memory, charged with real emotions. My mother, still a luminous figure, walked up to the screen and touched it lightly with her glowing fingertips. "This is the book of your life, Cassidy," she said, her tone soft but full of purpose. "Here you will see the choices you made, the impact you made, and the love you gave, or withheld." Images began to appear on the screen. The first was of myself, around 7 years old, sitting on my mother's lap. She read a book to me, her calm voice filling the room as I held a cup of hot chocolate. That moment hit me hard. It was one of the few moments I felt completely safe and loved before she left. But as the scenes progressed, tranquility gave way to pain. I saw the day she died, 14-year-old Misako sitting on the hospital floor, unable to process that she would never come back. I saw how this loss shaped my life, how I became obsessed with being perfect, with never making mistakes, as if I could make up for something. "You carried so much weight, my daughter," said my mother, with sadness in her voice. "But it was never your responsibility." The life review continued, revealing moments that I had buried in the back of my mind. I saw patients I treated throughout my career. Some I managed to save, others I lost. I relived the expressions of relief and gratitude, but also the tears and despair of their family members. Their every emotion now flowed through me. There were also moments of failure. I saw it once when I yelled at Lauren, my daughter, because she was exhausted and stressed. I relived the pain in her eyes, something that at the time I rationalized as insignificant. But there, in that light, I realized how much it had hurt her. My mother looked at me with infinite love. "The purpose of this review is not punishment, Cassidy, but understanding. You are seeing how love, or the lack of it, shapes everything around us." As the scenes continued, I realized that every choice I made, every word spoken or not, had echoed in ways I had never imagined. The light around me intensified, and the living screen that showed my life began to dissolve. In their place, images of the world emerged, but not the world as we know it. What I saw first was devastating. Entire forests burning, reduced to ashes. I saw once crystal-clear rivers dyed a dark brown, filled with debris, as if they had been abandoned by life. Cities came next. Some were submerged, swallowed by oceans that had risen beyond human control. Others were deserted, covered in dust and rubble from collapsed buildings. I heard screams, but they weren't just from people. It sounded like the planet itself was crying. My mother, still at my side, looked equally distressed. "The future of humanity is deeply connected to your choices, Cassidy," she said. "And right now, humanity is disconnected from the love, compassion, and earth that sustains it." I couldn't look away. I saw children crying, holding empty hands. I saw animals roaming devastated landscapes, looking for food or shelter. But what hit me hardest was the realization that these images weren't inevitable. They were a direct reflection of our actions, or our lack of action. Suddenly, the images changed. The screen showed a calendar, and the date January 16th it shone brightly, standing out like a beacon. "What does this date mean?" I asked, trying to absorb what I was seeing. "It will be a milestone," my mother replied. "A day of choice. On this day, humanity will have a unique opportunity to change direction. It is the turning point between destruction and renewal." She gestured, and new images began to emerge. This time, it was a different world, almost unrecognizable in its beauty. People were united in communities, planting trees and caring for each other. I saw clean rivers and vibrant forests. Children ran barefoot across green fields, while families laughed together. "The future is not written, Cassidy," my mother continued. "It is shaped by the choices made in the present, and it is up to each of us to be the catalyst for change." The visions began to dissipate, but their impact remained etched in my soul. I felt a lump in my throat and tears flowing, even in that spiritual state. "You have a role to play, my daughter, but there is still something else you need to decide." As the visions faded, I felt a different energy in the space around me. The light seemed more intense, almost penetrating, as if it wanted to envelop me completely. My mother, who had been by my side the entire time, turned to me, and her expression was now more serious, although it still carried tenderness. "Cassidy," she began, her voice echoing inside me. You need to make a choice. I looked at her, confused. Choice. About what? About going back or staying here, she said. You are in a place between worlds, where time does not exist, but your physical life can still be restored. However, coming back means carrying the weight of everything you saw, everything you learned. It means fighting, transforming, and guiding others. To remain here, on the other hand, is to accept eternal peace and let others shoulder that burden. For a moment, I was tempted by the idea of staying. The place I was in was so welcoming, so perfect, that it felt like a blessing to never have to feel pain or fear or regret again. But then I thought about Lauren, my 8-year-old daughter. The image of her face came to my mind with surprising clarity. I could hear her calling me, holding my hand in the hospital room. She still needs me, I whispered, almost as if talking to myself. My mother nodded, her light pulsing slightly, as if recognizing my thought before I even finished it. She needs it, but not just her. The world also needs your voice, your experience. The choices you make now can influence many lives. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to absorb everything I had experienced. I knew that coming back meant carrying the weight of my responsibility, but it also meant having the chance to make a difference. I want to go back, I declared, my voice full of determination. My mother looked at me with pride and sadness at the same time. You are stronger than you know, Cassidy. Remember that love is your greatest strength. Don't forget what you saw, and don't let the world distract you from your mission. Suddenly, I felt a strong pull, as if something was dragging me backwards. The light around me began to fade, and the sound of distant voices filled the void. The last thing I saw was my mother's soft smile as she murmured, "I'm always with you." And then, everything went dark again. A screeching sound cut through the darkness. It was a constant beep, almost irritating but at the same time familiar. It took my mind a moment to understand. It was the heart monitor. My consciousness began to align with my body, and with that, the pain and physical heaviness returned. I opened my eyes slowly, blinking against the bright light of the hospital room. "Cassidy! Cassidy! You're back!" Liam Callahan's voice came as a mix of relief and disbelief. He was next to me, his face tense and his eyes red, probably from worry. "Liam," my voice was hoarse, almost inaudible, as if I had forgotten how to speak. "You gave us such a scare," he said, holding my hand tightly. "Your blood pressure plummeted, and we lost you for almost 3 minutes. 3 minutes. For him, that was what had happened. But to me, it felt like I had been gone for days, maybe even weeks. Memories of the experience came flooding back like a wave, and my eyes filled with tears. Liam noticed my expression. "Are you well? Are you feeling pain?" I nodded, but I had no words to explain what I had just experienced. It was at that moment that I noticed another presence in the room. Lauren was there, sitting in a chair in the corner, holding a teddy bear to her chest. His eyes were red, but when he saw that I was awake, he ran to me. "Mommy!" she screamed, grabbing my free hand. "Hi, my love," I managed to say, my voice breaking. The touch of her small hand was like an anchor, bringing me completely back to the present. The days that followed were a blur of medical exams, visits from colleagues, and hesitant conversations. But inside, I knew I had changed. The world around me felt different, more fragile, more precious. In the silence of the night, as I lay in the hospital bed, my mother's words echoed in my mind. "Remember what you saw." I knew I couldn't let this experience be just a memory. It was a calling, a purpose, and I had to figure out how to honor it. I looked at Lauren, who was sleeping on a nearby couch, and whispered to myself, "For you, for her, and for all of us." The days after I was released from the hospital were filled with a strange mix of normality and renewal. The routine was there, making Lauren breakfast, taking her to school, and dealing with patients at the hospital. But something in me had changed irreversibly. Every moment seemed charged with a depth I hadn't realized before. I remember sitting in a park, watching Lauren play. The wind blew gently, rustling the leaves of the trees above me. Before, I would have focused on my phone or the next task. Now, I was completely present. Lauren's every laugh, every movement of the leaves, felt like a symphony in harmony with something greater. This transformation did not go unnoticed by Liam, who continued to follow me closely. One day, he invited me to lunch. We sat in a small cafe near the hospital, and he finally addressed what felt like it had been stuck in his throat since the day I woke up. "Cassidy, you look different," he said, his eyes fixed on mine. "I mean, you've always been dedicated, but now you seem more focused, more connected. What happened that day?" I swallowed hard. I had already rehearsed how to answer this question several times, but still, I didn't know how to start. "Liam, I've been somewhere else," I began, choosing my words carefully. "I saw things, felt things that I can't fully explain, but what I can say is that my perspective has changed. I know we have a greater responsibility than we realize, with ourselves, with others, and with the world." He looked at me for a long moment, processing what I had said. "You had a near-death experience," he stated, instead of asking. "Yes," I confirmed, my voice thick with emotion. He nodded, not pressing for more details. "I believe you, Cassidy. I just hope you know how much of a difference it already makes, even if you don't realize it." These words touched me deeply. I was still processing everything I had experienced, but one thing was certain. I could no longer live the same way. I decided right then and there that I would turn my experience into something tangible, something that could inspire and impact other people. Every gesture, no matter how small, began to carry a purpose. Planting a tree, separating the recyclable trash, writing a sweet note to Lauren, everything had meaning. I realized that small actions were just as important as big ones. The transformation I felt after my experience couldn't just stay within me. I knew I needed to take action, but I had no idea where to start. The first step was to reflect on the impact that I, individually, could make on the world around me. One of the first things I did was visit a community center in Seattle, where low-income families received basic support. There was a tree planting initiative to help restore degraded areas of the city, and I decided to participate with Lauren. She was excited about the idea, especially when I explained that we were helping the planet. "How will this help, Mommy?" Lauren asked, as we dug a hole for a cherry tree sapling. "Think about how each tree can provide shade, clean the air, and even be a home for birds and insects. Every little thing we do can change something bigger," I responded. As we worked, I realized that small gestures like this connected me to the message I received during my NDE. They were not grandiose actions that transformed the world, but the sum of thousands of small choices made with love and intention. At the hospital, my approach also changed. I started paying more attention to patients, not just as a doctor, but as a human being. Before, I kept an emotional distance, thinking it was best for me and them. Now I felt my mission included offering genuine empathy. There was a case that left a deep impression on me. A woman named June 45 was facing a terminal diagnosis. During a consultation, she started crying and said, "I feel like I've lived a whole life without really being present." I held her hand and, for the first time, shared part of my experience. Not all of it, but enough for her to feel hope. "June, it's never too late to start. Every moment you have now is an opportunity to live fully, to connect with those you love and with what really matters." I saw a change in her eyes, as if something had been unlocked. She began to become more involved with her family and even attended small meetings at the hospital to share her reflections with other patients. Additionally, I started writing about my experience. I didn't know if I would have the courage to publish, but I felt that putting everything on paper was a way to organize my thoughts and, perhaps, one day, share my message with the world. The message I received during my NDE was clear. Transforming your life starts with small choices, and that's exactly what I started doing, one day at a time. Time seems to drag by, as if the universe is holding its breath. Every moment is filled with a mix of anticipation and uneasiness as I wait for the day I saw during my near-death experience to arrive. I try to focus on simple tasks to keep my mind occupied, but the memory of the visions and the urgency of the message won't leave me alone. My routine has changed drastically since returning from the hospital. Every gesture, every choice, seems loaded with greater weight. When I take Lauren to school, I look at the faces of the people around me, wondering if they feel the same urgency, if they realize something is about to change. Sometimes I want to stop someone on the street and say, "You need to hear this, you need to prepare," but I take a deep breath and contain myself. However, I can no longer remain silent. After weeks of hesitation, I finally decided to share what I experienced. During the early morning hours, when the house was quiet and Lauren was sleeping soundly, I sat in front of the computer. I opened the file where I wrote everything down, my experience, the visions of destruction and hope, and, of course, the crucial date I was shown. I started typing a message, carefully rewriting and adjusting each word. I wanted people to feel the urgency without feeling terrified. I wanted to convey hope, but also a need for action. I used simple and direct sentences, as if I were speaking directly to whoever was reading. The future we all know is at stake. I recently had an experience that showed me the truth about what awaits us as humanity. We are at a tipping point. If we choose to continue down the path of greed and disconnection, we will face destruction. But there is another path, a future, where we live in harmony with the world and with each other. As soon as I finished, I posted the message on social media and in forums where people discussed spirituality, the environment, and social change. I didn't know what to expect, but the impact was immediate. People started commenting, sharing, and even sending me private messages, thanking me for having the courage to tell my story. Now, I'm here, waiting. I don't know exactly what will happen, but I feel like the appointed day will bring something big, something that will change everything. I'm ready to do my part, and to help others do theirs. Waiting is a mixture of hope and fear. I feel like I'm on top of a mountain, looking at an approaching storm, but also at a sky that promises to clear up after the storm. Each day that passes brings me closer to the date I saw in my visions, and my mind is filled with questions. What will happen? Will people hear the message? Will it be too late? I spent the last few days dedicating myself to spreading the message in the best way possible. I organized online talks, recorded a video explaining my experience, and even wrote an article for a local news website. My words are starting to reach more people, but I still feel like it's not enough. One morning I received an unexpected email. It was from a woman named Tara, who said she had read my story and wanted to thank me. Your message touched me deeply. I already knew deep down that we were on the wrong path, but you gave me the courage to change. This morning, I got my family together and we decided to start with small things. Reduce our waste, plant a garden, and, most importantly, talking to each other about how we can live more connected lives. This message gave me strength to continue. Every person who reads, listens to, or shares my story is a spark that can ignite something greater. I realized that I don't need to change the world alone. My mission is to spread the word, plant the seeds, and trust others to do the same. At home, Lauren has been my greatest source of strength. His simple gestures, like giving me drawings of trees and people smiling, remind me why I'm doing this. She represents the future I hope we can build, a future that honors life in all its forms. As the day approaches, I've started doing something I've previously avoided, praying. It is not a conventional prayer, but an honest conversation with the greater force I felt during my NDE. I ask for strength, wisdom, and above all, hope to face what is to come. Today, as I look out the window and see the rain gently falling, I feel a strange peace. I believe that, regardless of what happens, I did what I could. My mother said the future is not written, and that gives me courage. Maybe, just maybe, humanity will choose the path of love. I'm ready for whatever comes. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.